Welcome back to Answers to Critical Questions. I am SJ Akai. Have you ever wondered where evil came from? Did God create evil? Maybe these are questions that have bothered you. Dr. Ledbetter said that God did not create evil, but that evil is a result of us taking God's goodness and turning it against Him. But how do we do this? Let us hear from our teacher, Dr. Ledbetter.
That's a good question. And I'm going to start with the nature of evil. What they're really saying is, where did evil come from? And
Yes.
and many people say that if God created everything, he must have created evil. And so let's answer that question. No, God created everything. All beings are created by God, whether there be things in heaven, things in earth, whether they be thrones, dominions, principalities, or powers. All things were created by him and for him, and he's before all things, and by him all things hold together or cohere. That's what you'll see in Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 17. Now, he created all creatures, but evil is not a separate entity. It's not something that existed outside of God along with God. Neither is it something that God created. Evil is the result of God giving us freedom of choice. Evil is the result of God giving us a will where we can make decisions freely. And so when God made man in his own image, after his own likeness, he gave him the ability to make choices. And in making those choices, we use God's goodness to pervert those choices to attack him. And so evil is really taking God's goodness and turning it around against him, to use against him. When you watch Satan, for example, in Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 14, the entire context is talking about the king of Babylon, but it goes beyond the king of Babylon to Satan, and how he said, I will be like the Most High. In other words, God had exalted him as an anointed angel, but the more God gave him, the more he wanted more. And so now he challenges God himself. And if you watch the pride and evil in humanity, they do the same thing. The more people have power, the more power they want. And so they continue to go where they're trying to use it to get rid of God. And humanity has been trying to get rid of God for centuries. That's why they did the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. And that's why it's going to culminate in Babylon the Great, whore, in Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Man always thinks that he can exalt himself. In Romans chapter 1, it says in verse 21, even when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful. But they became vain in their own imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And they changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and four-footed beasts and birds and creatures. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts. And God also gave them up to depraved minds, that you see in Romans 1:28. They changed the truth of God into a lie. So God has given us a wonderful gift to be free to love him. But when we try to figure that, wait a minute, we don't have to love God, we can get rid of him and have everything. We buy into that satanic lie that we don't need God, we can become our own God. And that's exactly what the serpent did with Eve in the Garden of Eden. You will not surely die. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. And so evil is really the perversion of God giving us good choices. So God giving us the freedom to make choice is a good thing. Evil is using that freedom to try to get rid of God and trying to make God's glory our own. And so when we don't give God the glory, then we diminish ourselves. When we try to take the glory from God, we become perverted, we become depraved, we become debased. And that's exactly what the issue is. So don't think of evil as something God created. Evil is what we are using God's freedom to do. And by doing that, we corrupted ourselves into that sinful state that we cannot escape except through the blood of Christ. And so evil is really when you pervert God's goodness of choice.